But we notice when it says, and these are the names of the children of Israel who were coming to Egypt with Jacob, each man and his household, they came. So in the Hebrew, you have the vav, which means the word and. So I'm sure that if you taught English, or you had a teacher who taught English, or your mother corrected you at some point in your life, never to start a sentence with the word and. And this is a beginning of a whole new book yet. So we're going to wonder, why does it say and? And the word habayim is present tense. And these are the names of the children of Israel. I know it says in Hebrew, we're coming, but it's present tense, as if they're coming now to Egypt with Jacob. Jacob's dead. Well, he never died. That's part of it. Okay. It says, Ishu Beito, each man and his household. Ba'u, past tense, they came. So, what's going on here? So the Kliyakar points out this to start with. He says, Hoisi vav b'milat va'ela. You have this extra vav on the word these. And also he points out that the word habayim, comings, in the beginning of the verse, or the first time ba is mentioned, it's lashon hoveh, present tense, and only later when it says ishu beito, each man and his household, they came, past tense, lashon avar. So if you look at the last verse of the last week's parsha, which I think is on number 1 on the source sheet, it says, and Joseph died at the age of 110 years, and they embalmed him, and he was placed in the coffin of Egypt. It's like a run-on sentence. And these are the names. Meaning, Jacob's dead. Joseph's dead. Joseph's dead. He's placed in the coffin. When you're placed in the coffin, you're dead. And yet, they're coming. Now, if you look in verse 8, it says, a new king arose over Egypt. So maybe you heard the Medrash. The question is this a new king? Or is it the same old king with a new attitude? So all the Egyptians had a different attitude as soon as Joseph died. When Joseph died, they forgot of all the great things that he did for them. And they were no longer having an attitude of gratitude, but rather this is where the enslavement even got harder. So there were stages. We talked about last week when Yaakov died, the enslavement began. Now when Joseph died, the enslavement got worse. And when Levi died, he's the last of the tribal leaders that died. Then it even took a harder turn. But what we're learning here is what he's going to point out was that after the death of Yosef, Achrei Mos Yosef, Lo hayu pnei hamitzrim im Yisrael kitmo v'shilshom. The attitude of the Egyptians turned. Turned sour. Vayu margishim oz habi'iyah l'mitzrayim ki'ilu bo pamahu l'mitzrayim. That they felt as if the Jews just arrived. Now they're here. Now we can enslave them. And now we understand why it says the vav, va'ela, and because it's a continuation, we would know this because from the aspect that Yosef had died. Shemitzad mitat Yosef doime ki'ilu achshav hema boim. From the aspect that Yosef had died, it's as if they just arrived. Okay. However, nevertheless, aval mikol makom, alpha pish Yosef made, even though Yosef died, Yaakov never died. That's why the verse says they came with Yosef, with Yaakov. Look at the verse again. It says with Jacob. These are the names of the children of Israel who were coming to Egypt with Jacob. Because the schut, the merit of Jacob lived on. It was still with them. What was the merit of Yaakov? The schut of Yaakov, the merit of Yaakov was that they were gedurim me'arayos. They did not intermarry with the Egyptian women who were steeped in, as we said many times, immoral sexual behaviors. I lost my place. Schut Yaakov amad lehem. The merit of Yaakov stood with them. Schut ma, because they were guarded in against sexual proprieties. V'lo ratu lisa min hamitzrit shetufei zima. They didn't desire to marry the women, the Egyptian women. That's why it says, Ish ubeito bo. Each man with his household they came. They came married. All the tribal leaders, the brothers, they all came married when they came down to Egypt.
And their kids as well.
And their whoever came, the 70 souls. They were all married. Okay? That's what it means when it says, each man and his household, they came past tense. Past tense, meaning that before they even left Israel, before they left the land of Canaan, they came married. And the commentators also explain. Now this is a totally different take on the words Ish ubeito. This is going to blow you guys away. When it says Ish ubeito, the word Ish, each man and his household came. Now you're looking in the English, it's going to be a little distracting. Think now in Hebrew. Ish is a code name for God. God came and his household, meaning the entourage of his own court, which are full of angels. God himself goes down into exile. When we go into exile, he comes with us. He is constantly involved with us. And you'll see, I'm going to prove this in a second, but and when we are redeemed, meaning when we leave our exile, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, comes back with us as well. So, how do we know that the word Ish can mean God? So if you look on the source sheet number 2, it says the Lord is a master of war, the Lord is his name, but the word master is Ish. The word man, like you say Mr. Mr. means master. Ish milchama, Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. This is right out of the Torah, I'm not making this up. Yud Kei Vav Kei, Ish milchama, is a man of war, is a god of war, is a master of war. Yud Kei Vav Kei is his name. Hashem is his name. The Lord is his name. And now what do you understand also? Base Dino, meaning that his household came down with him as his base din. Now remember we discussed this before. Whenever it says Lifnechem, look at the verse number 3, Exodus 13:21. Did I give the quote from the last verse? It was Exodus 15:3. So now this is Exodus 13:21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to cause it to lead them on the way, and at night in a pillar of fire to give them light. So we're talking about God's agent, malachim, messengers, angels. This wasn't God himself in the pillar of fire. This was a pillar of fire that God created for us. Right? So it says, the Lord went before them. Remember we discussed this before, but when it says, anytime it says God was lifnei, remember it meant angels, not God himself. Right? Or we said it was angels, it wasn't men. Remember we discussed this. Okay. So this proves to you that this was angels that went before God. So on the way out, the Beis Din also came out. Why do you need a Beis Din? A Beis Din is a Jewish court, a halakhic court. Ma inyan Beit Din l'kam. What do you need to have his Beis Din here? So we're going to see that God promised Abraham at the Brit, Bein HaBetarim, at the covenant between the parts. You can see in number 4, it's Genesis 15, verse 14. So it's V'nira shabo lahavticham shitkayim behem. He wanted to show them that he was fulfilling his promise when he says, look what he said to Abraham, and also the nation that they will serve, I will judge. Remember, he says you're going to be serving, you're going to be a stranger in a land that's not yours, and you will be afflicted and have all these hardships. So God himself said, the nation they will serve, that being Egypt, I will judge. We know that God judged Egypt harshly. I mean, not only with the 10 plagues, later on it was even more magnificent at the splitting of the sea. You know what happened at the splitting of the sea, right? The whole Egyptian army was plummeted. What's the word you use? Drowned. And, you know, we even took out more gold out of the sea, came up on the seashore, than we left Egypt with. So not only did we leave Egypt with great wealth, but when the Egyptians were overturned in the sea, came up on the shore even more gold than we had left with. So God judged them severely. Therefore, now we understand that God came with himself and his court, lahavticham, to assure them and to fulfill the promise that Hashem would fight with them. God would fight for them in Egypt. God was there with us the whole time. Okay? Good so far? You have to go?
Have a great Shabbos, guys.
He said Shabbat Shalom. Have a great Shabbos. Okay. Any questions at this point? Don't worry about it. Have a great Shabbos. You benched? You didn't? Any questions at this point? Everything's good? Elu Shmos B'nai Yisrael. Rashi says on this verse, this you could find in Exodus 1:1, number 5. Number 5 in the source sheets. This is Rashi on Exodus 1:1. Now we know who the 12 tribes are. We know their names. But God is counting them again. Although God counted them in their lifetime, you can look in Genesis 46, 8 through 27. He counts them again after their death to let us know how precious they are to him. The 12 tribes, the Jewish people, the Israelites, the Hebrew nation, or family, are dear to Hashem. And it says, right, Lahodia Chavatan Shinim Chavim. Because they are likened to the stars, he takes them out far from beyond the horizon. He brings them in by number and by name, as it is said in Isaiah 40, verse 26, who takes out their hosts by number. All of them he calls by name. So the Jewish people are like stars, Kochavim. They're compared to stars who are counted. Precious things are counted. I'm sure that if you don't count them, you just type in your count number and look on your, at least you dig your hands into your pockets, you know what you have. You look at your wallet every now and again. You look in your safe deposit box every now and again. You look at your count maybe every day. But anything that's important to you, you count. I don't know if you count your kids. You count your kids. Okay. So what is it? Why are they compared to stars? Like, why? So what is it about stars? So, what is it about stars? Even though you can't see the stars during the day, when you look up at the sky, all you see is either clouds or blue sky, or the sun is shining in your eye. You can't see all the stars. But you know that they're there. Are you aware, are you cognizant of the fact that the sky is full of stars? Only at night, really. But you should be aware of the fact that during the day you cannot see them, but they're there. So the truth is the stars are there even by the day. So what is it about a righteous person? A righteous person, the same thing. That's why they're compared to stars. And here, the world to come. So too, a tzaddik in the world to come, a righteous person in the world to come. Do you see them in this world? No. Here they disappear from this world, but they're still in existence in the world to come. So he says, now we compare them to the day. In the day, when you can't see them, but they're there, they're really there. Yesh lo mitziut, they have existence. Ve'eno nira, they're not, you cannot see them. Ve'eno avad, ki'im l'doro, The only thing about these righteous people are, that generation does not sense their being around anymore. But they are around. So what does he think he means? That generation. I think it has to do with reincarnation. I think it's very deep. But at least we understand, at least in that generation, that's where the loss is from. Now he says that there's some opinions, not an opinion, commentators that express the same idea in a different way. And not just differently, but actually in an opposing fashion. The only time you see the stars are at night. So too, the light of a righteous person will shine only after he dies. We're comparing light to this world, night to the world to come. Meaning when we say someone's sun has set, we say they went west. It means, you know what I mean? They're gone. They passed on. So it's only after the person dies that you're able to understand how righteous they were as well, as he will now explain. There's a thing called a Shem Tov. A Shem Tov means a good name. How does one make a good name for themselves? So the way to do it is to do it until the end, right? Because that's when it really is going to make a difference about everything. He says, it seems to me that Lefi Shekol Ikar Shem Tov Shel Adam, that the real prime good name a person can make for himself, Eino Nikar, it's not really recognizable until after he dies. Ki b'chayav and the while he's still alive, nobody really knows what's going to happen towards the end of his days if he will remain righteous. Like it says, and I believe I brought the verse, number 6. Well, this is more to do with the Gemara, but if you look on Psalms 139, verse 11, darkness will darken me, and the night will be as light about me. What does he mean? He's talking about after he dies. This was just part of the Gemara that was describing in Gemara Pesachim what exactly does the term Or La'arba Asar, the night of the 14th, when we check for chametz, we check for leavened bread and get rid of it and burn it before Pesach, the Passover. It's called Or. The night is called light. So that's a whole discussion, very deep philosophical discussion we're not going to go into right now, but that's all based on the Gemara in Pesachim 2b. Okay, so now we go on. Ki b'chayav ein makom l'spor shivcha. While someone's still alive, it's not really the time to speak about all of his righteous acts. Ki mi yodea im yishaer b'tzidkato. Who knows if he'll remain righteous towards the end of his life? V'zeu shenamar. This is what it means when it says. That's why our verse, if you now look towards the end of verse 5, it says, and Joseph was in Egypt. And Rashi tells us right there when it says Joseph was in Egypt, first of all, Joseph's dead, right? Joseph's not alive. I'll just read the whole verse. And all the persons who emerged from Jacob's loin were 70 souls, and Joseph was in Egypt. Come on. Then it says Joseph died. Joseph was not in Egypt anymore. Joseph was, well, maybe he was, because he was in the casket 4 verses before. But Joseph is dead. So it's teaching us that Joseph actually stayed righteous until his very end. Shemitzad, I'll just read it again. Shabolo diatzikato, that this verse of Joseph was in Egypt teaches us that he was righteous until his end. He kept righteous from the very beginning of his life until the very end. And as we see in the next one, number 7, Ecclesiastes 12:2. Yeah. I don't know if I quoted this correctly. It's actually number 8. No, it is. 1 second. Something's wrong. Oh, it's number 10. Look quickly at number 10. That's where we're at already. Number 10, Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13. The end of the matter, everything having been heard. So what does it mean? At the end of the matter, everything having been heard? Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the entire man. meaning only after the person passes on, he's dead at the end in the Hebrew. Sof davar, the end of the matter, everything is heard, everything is understood. Because that means at the end of someone's life, then it's known if the person was righteous until the very end. Otherwise, we have to always be on guard. And that's why we don't tell a person's praise until after he dies. Al Kain Siper Shivcho Acher, that's why his praise is told now. In other words, in the last part of last week's Parsha, we heard that Yosef died, and now there's praise. He was in Egypt, and he kept righteous. And now we understand why they're compared to the stars. Because they only appear after the sun is set. After a person's sun has set, meaning after he has died. Then his righteousness appears and is well known if he kept it until I'll call it the bitter end, but it doesn't have to be bitter, as we know. And now we know when it says in Daniel 13:3. Did I give that page to you? Oh, I wrote 12:3 because, did I make a mistake? No, it is 12:3. Okay. This is Daniel 12:3. And the wise will shine like the brightness of the sky, and those who bring the multitudes to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. What does it mean? Umatzdike harabim, those who cause the multitudes to be righteous, they are going to be like the stars forever. What does it mean, those who cause people to be righteous? Like the teachers, the rabbis, anybody who brings Torah to the public and ethical teachings, and obviously is a good role model. Someone who causes the masses to be righteous, sin will not come to his hand. How can it possibly be that sin will come to his hand? God sets up a special protection. Sin won't come to his hand. Why? Kadei shelo yehu b'gehenim, so that he doesn't descend into hell and all his students go to the Garden of Eden. Okay, it sounds crazy. No, our concept of hell anyway, Gehenna, is a very short-lived punishment. It's maximum 12 months, but it is a refining period for the soul. It can be very painful. It's a very short period of time compared to eternity. But nevertheless, if somebody is causing people to do the right thing, they bring it to their attention, the way to act, they teach halakha, they're causing the masses to be righteous, there's no way that God's going to let that person go to hell and his students go to heaven. It just won't happen. So God will protect that person and not allow him to sin. It doesn't mean he loses his free will, but it's to a certain extent, it's a protection against using his free will in the wrong way. I don't know, I want to get to the name part, because that's like the really exciting part. And how much time we have? You guys okay for a while, or do you have like a limited time? Okay. Okay, so we say that our rabbis taught us that the righteous people are compared to stars, and they're brought in and they're brought out by God according to their number. There's a little bit of a hint to this in the idea that we said the word Habayim. Remember in the very first verse where it says that these are the names of the children of Israel who are coming. It's a language of present tense. And as well it says each man and his household they came, which is past tense. So since we're speaking about two comings, there's two comings. One, when they came into Mitzrayim, and it says with Yaakov. And then when it says each man and his household, they already came, so that is referring to The first coming was with Yaakov. The first coming was with Yaakov. And also each person came with his wife. That's past tense. But now, since we're speaking, Sherotza Ledaber Mimitatam, since we're speaking from the fact that they're dead already, Kizeh Nikra Gam Kain Bia, this is also called a coming. In other words, there's like two births. There's the birth of there's like a conception. We come down into Egypt. But the real birth is when people die. In other words, this is a bridge. This world is a bridge to another world. Kizeh Nikra Gam Kain Bia, when someone dies, it's also considered a coming. V'doma kilu aksha bao, as if they're coming right now. After they die, there, and they remain there. But they're coming where? 1 second, that's all. He says, Zebbiya Shnia. The second coming is in present tense. But in the second coming, they didn't come with Yaakov. Since they died, but Yaakov didn't die. Gam biazu ena ish ubeito yachad. This type of death, or this type of coming, was alone, each man by himself and his household by themselves. In other words, what he's trying to explain is when a person dies, he doesn't take his wife and his children with him. It's a very lonely existence in the very beginning. Ki ishto bonov eno malavi motokim ad akever. The only escort that they'll get is by their wife and their children to the edge of the grave. And that's why it's not considered each man with his wife, but each person is going to be counted individually like the stars of heaven. Okay. I want to get now into the whole names thing, because this is like the really exciting part. So as we know, the verse gives the names: Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehudi, Yisachar, Zvulun, Binyamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. That's how the verse lists the names. So the Kliyakar tells us it specifies here their names. Why? Why are their names need to be specified? And this is kind of a rehash of the lessons we learned, but we're going to go much deeper. In the merit of the four things that we did, our forefathers did to be redeemed from Egypt. Number one, they did not change their names. Number two, they didn't change their language. Number three, they guarded themselves against sexual immorality, and they didn't speak Lashon Hara, they didn't speak evil speech. I want to tell you, evil speech does not only mean negative things I tell about you to someone else, but it's the camaraderie, it's the fellowship that exists that we wouldn't tell a foreign party, we wouldn't, hang our dirty laundry. Okay, so let's talk about it. So the reason for the matter is mentioned in the Medrash, that each name of the tribes actually are symbolic or have an impression of redemption. So, I don't know if your sheet, they look like this. It has some English, actually, you know what? Maybe it's like this. That one's better. Okay, you have that one? If their names would have been changed, but they kept the Hebrew language, they wouldn't have had the impression of redemption, because the names themselves have, I don't know how to express it. It's like the concept of redemption, salvation, is embedded in the name. The name itself is symbolic of hope. You follow? Like if someone's name is Hope, or if someone's name is Faith. So would they ever give up faith or give up hope? No. So it's like when you have a name like this, you're always going to be anticipating getting out of the dark valleys of death that we go through. So this is from the Medrash. So I want to just explain also, if they kept their names but changed their language, so then the names wouldn't mean the same thing in a different language. So this is proof that they kept both their names and their language. And so it starts off with Reuven from Exodus chapter 3, verse 7. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people. From the word Reuven is the word Re'eh. It's the same letters, some of the same letters. I have seen the affliction of my people that are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their pains. This is God speaking. God has seen our pains, and He's going to take us out. So the fact that we know He's seeing us, if you have the name Reuven, you're consciously aware that God is looking. Shimon, from the word hearing. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered His covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and with Jacob. So from the word V'yishma Elokim, there's a understanding that God hears, He's constantly involved. Levi, many nations will join themselves to the Lord in that day, and shall become. It's also a language of what we talk about, the Zman of Mashiach, the time of the Mashiach. This is a future, Zechariah 2, verse 15. So the word Nilveh is from Levi. It's like an escort or a entourage. It means to join up. And Yehuda, this is going through all the names. I mean, I love it. So I hope you can hang in there with me. You will say on that day, I think that S doesn't belong there. I thank you, O Lord, for you were angry with me, but now your wrath has subsided, you comforted me. So this is another language of comfort and hope. And Binyamin, from his right hand, Binyamino, for Hashem has sworn, this is in Isaiah 62:8. He swore by His right hand, by His powerful arm, surely I will no more give all your things away to your enemies, but this is all the things you worked for, you will get. I'm not going to give them to your enemies anymore. Dan, we already saw that verse, but also that nation whom they shall serve, I will judge. This also has to do with the redemption, right? As we talked about the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea and all the judgments that come upon our enemy. And Naphtali is from the language of Nofet to Nafna. The sweetness of Torah drips from your lip like honey, and milk lies under your tongue. Your very garments are scented with precepts like the smell of Lebanon. This is from Shir Shirim, Song of Songs, which is a love story between the Jewish people and God. Gad is based on the word like the manna, the food that God fed us in the desert. And it tasted like cake fried in honey. I'm not sure what that tastes like, but I can only imagine it must be very good. The word Asher is from the word Ashrei, praising. All the nations will praise you. Praising Hashem. You have a name, praising God. I don't think you're going to give up hope of your relationship. And Yosef, it will be on that day the Lord once again show His hand to recover. The word recovering, the remnant of His people. He will once again take us out, anyone who remained, and have that relationship. Yisachar, from the word schar, from reward, from payment. Thus said the Lord. I'm sorry, I'm not mentioning all these verses. I should go back. God was in Exodus 16:31. Asher is in Malachi 3:12. Joseph is in Isaiah 11:11. Yisachar is Jeremiah 31:15. And the Lord said, refrain your voice from weeping and your ears from tears, for there is reward for your accomplishment, the word of the Lord, and they will return from the land of their enemy. And Zvulun is dealing with Hashem's house, the Beit HaMikdash. I have surely built a house of habitation for you, the foundation for your dwelling forever. Okay. You got it, guys? So this is Parsha Shmot. This is the Parsha, the book of the names. So I think he pretty much proved his point that you need both the Hebrew language and the names, because if you had switched the names, then they would have lost all hope. Because even if they kept the language but took different names, those names don't reflect redemption and salvation. Or if they would have changed the name, and whatever name they would have changed to, they would have given up all hope. But no, and they would not have sought out that relationship that comes with the redemption and everything that follows it. Let me just go down to the next part. We say that they were guarding themselves against spiritual sexual immorality. So if they weren't, they wouldn't have been fitting to be redeemed. But if they were not guarding themselves, then they would have married the Egyptians, and then they would have been, as it says in Ezekiel 23:20. So I think I have that somewhere. Huh? Mayor, I can't hear you. I have it somewhere. Here.
I'm fine.
Yeah, it's like on one of these sheets at the back. I think I have it here. Ezekiel. Ezekiel 23:20. It's really 23:19 and 20. It talks about the Egypt. Then she increased her adulteries, remembering the days of her youth when she was promiscuous in the land of Egypt. She lusted for the concubinage of those whose flesh is the flesh of donkeys and whose issue is the issue of horses. They were very much involved in bestiality in Egypt, and we never would have, we would have lost our righteousness had we been with them, and it was compared to bestiality. And number 4, that we did not get involved in idol worship. So the idea here, if you notice on that same page, this you'll find in Exodus 11 verse 1, I believe. It's a fascinating concept. 11 verse 1. Hashem said to Moses, "One more plague I'm going to bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. After that he shall send you forth from here. When he sends you forth, it will be entirely..." It's actually verse 2. "Please speak in the ears of the people. Let each man request of his fellow, and each woman from her fellow silver vessels and gold vessels." You follow that verse 2? 11 verse 2?
Yep.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, now think about this. We already knew 400 years before we're going to come out with great wealth. How can we come out with great wealth if we're slaves? So the Jews knew they have to come out with great wealth. In fact, God didn't want to, he couldn't bring them out without great wealth, because that would be how would you say, it would be like he would be lying to Abraham. How could he tell Abraham, your kids are going to do all this work, but they're going to come out with great wealth? So if they came out without great wealth, so it means that he didn't keep the promise he gave to Abraham. He promised Abraham they would come out with great wealth. Now we're talking about the end of the 10 plagues. This happens to be the 9th plague. So there's going to be one more plague, but this is the 9th plague, the plague of darkness. So what's going to happen? That the Jews knew already 11 months before. Remember, the plagues took anywhere between 12 and 12 months, 10 and 12 months. So they already knew about 10 or 11 months before that they were going to be leaving very shortly with great wealth. And that during the 9th plague of darkness, that's when they're going to have the opportunity to ask, what happened during this plague? That it was so dark the Egyptians couldn't move. But the Jews had light. Now they worked in those homes. They worked in these people's homes. They knew where the jewelry and the gold and the money was kept. So they're going to ask them for it. And the Egyptians are going to say, I'm not lending it to you. So the Jew would say, don't worry, I know where it is. Don't worry, I know you can't move. First of all, is this stealing? This is God told Moses. He didn't just tell Moses, he actually had to plead to Moses to tell them. Because they actually said, can we borrow? But they had no intention to return it. The truth is, it's very complicated, but on one level, for 210 years or 80 years, however you want to look at the slavery, they owed us. That was money that we actually earned and worked for that they never paid us. They actually owed us money because we were their slaves. So during this 9th plague of darkness, it lasted 3 days. Each Jew asked, well, let's say the women asked the women and the men asked the men. They asked these Egyptians for their gold and their jewelry. Can we borrow? And they didn't really have a choice. They said no. But what I'm trying to tell you is that the Egyptians did not know that the Jews were going to ask them. But the Jews did know. They already knew 9-10 months before they were leaving, and this is how it's going to come about. So the secret of the Jewish not talking Lashon Hara here is specifically talking about the fact that the Jews knew the plan, the scheme that God had set up for them, and they didn't tell the Egyptians. In other words, they didn't hang their dirty laundry out, or they didn't hang the secrets of the family. They kept it tight-knit. Only the Jews knew that, during those 10 months, keep an eye out where they're keeping all their gold and jewelry, get an idea of what the combination lock is, or on their safes, whatever they had. Because in X amount of time, we're going to be asking them for their stuff. And of course, they're going to be sitting there saying, oh, I don't have it. I don't know what you're talking about. And you'll be able to know exactly where it is. But if they knew that you were going to be doing this, they would have hid it without your knowledge. They would have sent it out of town. They would have dug it deep into the ground and hid it without anybody seeing them. But they didn't, because they had no expectations that the Jews were going to do this. But all the Jews knew, and they didn't let it out of the bag. They didn't let the secret out. Okay, is it clear? Any questions on that piece? Because I tried to give it over in a way that he says like this.
So then they actually did take it from them? It wasn't given to them?
No, it was not given to them. It was not given to them. They actually did take it. And in the last 40 or 50 years, there's been about 3 times the Egyptian government has tried to sue the Israeli government for all the gold and jewelry that was taken 3,300 years ago. And we roll our eyes, like, yeah, right? And, what do you think we say to them? We didn't steal it. That was what was owed to us for the 80 years or 90 years of slavery. So, but that means it's an admission that we were there. In other words, oh yeah, the Jews are all fake. They were never in Egypt. We didn't slave them. But you were here and you took our money. How can they tell us? How can they sue us in international court? You can look it up. Egypt sues Israel in international court for all the interest. What a chutzpah. All the interest for 3,300 years. And then they deny it at the same time that it never happened. So it's kind of a joke. But yes, remember, God told Moses this is how it's going to play out. It's not like this is a scheme from the Jews. Unless somehow, in other words, you believe that the Jews wrote the Torah. Okay. One of the proofs that the Jews didn't write, that we didn't write the Torah? All the negative stuff's written in there.
Yeah.
If you were going to write a book about your family history, you leave all the bad stuff out. Okay, so now we're going to get to another part of the verse. These are the names of the children of Israel. So even though that Yosef died, and then the slavery was close in coming, nevertheless, the intent, the impression of redemption remained with them, and that's why they kept their names. I'll just read in Hebrew. B'kol makom rosh magula nishar kayam, ki ilu shemotam imahem ba'u l'sha'avar v'imahem hema boim gam akshav. Okay, we spoke about that. 1 second. I think we spoke. I turn to what page I'm on here. Okay, so they kept their names. And they kept their language. And when it says each man and his household they came, that shows again that they were guarded against sexual immorality. Remember, each man clung with his wife and not to another. He stuck with his wife and not another. And also, they married the women, they married their converted women or their sisters. There was a whole idea of who their wives were, just like Adam had sons. Each son was born with a sister and they traded or whatever. There was no real issue of incest before the Torah was given. But anyway, they came down either with their sisters, they married their sisters, or they converted these women and they married them before they came down. But remember, it was all in order not to marry these Egyptian women. And as we mentioned about the names as well, each name represented Geula. Okay, so Vihi Kol Nefesh. So where does it say that? I lost my page. Here it is. Vihi Kol Nefesh. It's in the beginning of 5, and all the persons who emerged from Jacob's loins. All the souls. The word for a person is a soul. Nefesh, in Hebrew, when we say a person, we're talking about a nefesh. It's a soul. I'm telling you, when you live Hebrew, talk Hebrew, it's like living in a different world. You know? So we call a person a nefesh, a soul. So it mentions 70 souls, but it's in singular. In other words, in the Hebrew it says, V'hi kol nefesh, the entire soul. All 70 souls are really wrapped up in one to teach us that there was peace among them. They actually had peace. Mitok shelo haya behem lashon hara. They didn't speak lashon hara. There was a peace amongst them. So each person kept their mouth shut. Whatever was in their hearts, they didn't speak about. And that's what we're talking about. For 12 months, they didn't reveal that secret that I mentioned. And also when it says they came out of his loins, right? Look at 5. All the persons who emerged from Jacob's loins. Why does it say Jacob's loins? The Hebrew is Yotze Yerech Yaakov. They came out to teach you that just like the loin is something that is covered, is kept private, so too by them this whole matter was kept private just amongst them. This idea that I mentioned about the revelation that we're going to take the gold and the wealth out of Egypt. Okay, so we can open up to questions at this point because pretty much covered most of the stuff that I prepared.
What about Dinah? She's not talked about.
Dinah. Well, she's dead at this point, but it's a question what happened. Whether Shimon married her, whether Joseph's wife is the daughter of Dinah, who actually came about because of the rape. A lot of midrashim. But at this point, she's gone. But anyway, you want to know why she's not counted amongst the tribes? Because the tribe goes according to the father. In other words, it's not that women are insignificant, God forbid. They all had, right? They all had wives, but they're not mentioned either. In fact, when the 70 souls go down to Egypt, there's only 2 women that are mentioned. Dinah is mentioned, and Yocheved is not really mentioned, but Yocheved actually was born. Rashi mentioned she's the 70th soul. She was born as they entered Egypt.
Yeah.
Which brings me to a very fundamental point. That Adam Harishon, Adam the first man, when he gave birth to Seth, he was 130 years old. Yocheved comes in, she's born as they're coming in, and how old was Moshe? Moshe was 80 years old. And when they left 210 years after they came down to Egypt. So take 210 years minus 80, you have 130. Moses was born when Yocheved was 130. So this idea, to a certain extent, we're talking about the Jewish people are reincarnated souls of all the souls that were born during that 130-year period and perfected. maybe we'll talk about through Seth. Seth was born at 130, and Moses was the leader here in this case. This is going to be very Kabbalistic, but Moses in the end takes out what we call the Erev Rav, and God didn't even give him permission. So what I heard and understood, that while the Egyptians were trying to get bread and food during the famine, you'll look at the verses, it says that there were Egyptians that complained to Pharaoh and says, he's making us do things. Do we have to listen to him? And Pharaoh says, yes, you better listen to him. Rashi says there that Yosef was telling them to be circumcised. So according to the Kabbalistic teachings, that during the 130 years that Adam was actually abstinent and fasting, many souls were born through his spilling of seed, and these were not such great spirits, but they were spirits nevertheless, and we believe in reincarnation. Huh? What happened?
I think your battery is dying.
No, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay. But we keep losing you off and on.
Okay, so you'll have to listen to the recording. So let me just get this. So we say that Adam, after Cain and Abel, it's really, remember, Cain and Abel was born on the first day of creation, that he abstained from having any more children. He abstained from being with his wife for 130 years until Seth was then born. During these years, these 130 years, there was, we call ejaculations of natural kinds, seed that was spilled, which was not a good thing. And Adam, through this process, created many evil spirits. And these evil spirits went into these Egyptians that we call the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes that came out of Egypt. Interesting that Moses is born exactly 130 years after they came into Egypt. Remember, Yocheved was born as they were coming in. That's when she was born. She was the 70th soul that came into Egypt. Just to do the math one more time, Moses was 80 years old when they left Egypt. Remember, he died at 120. There were 40 years in the desert. So we know he was 80 years old when they left Egypt. So minus 210 years that they were in Egypt, minus the 80 from that, and you have 130. So there's something significant in Moses' leading the Jewish people at this point in time. 130 years after Yocheved comes in, as if Yocheved is a reincarnated being of Eve, giving birth at 130 year. What do we say? How do we go? I'm sorry. When she was 130, she gave birth to Moses. Okay. So it's not insignificant; it's significant. The people of Egypt that complained in that verse, I don't have it in front of me, the people complained, the Egyptian people complained, it actually says, Am B'nai Yisrael. Am B'nai Yisrael. Complained. So anytime we see the word Am, I think we talked about this, it's always talking about the Erev Rav. So the combination where it says Am B'nai Yisrael, we know these were already the Erev Rav, and Rashi says on that verse, when they complained to Pharaoh, that they're complaining because Pharaoh tells them to be Yosef told them, in order for me to give you food, you have to be circumcised. Because Yosef knew that these souls needed a tikkun, some kind of fixing. Anyway, it must be related to the idea that when Moses takes out the Erev Rav, that they need a tikkun. And he's willing to bring them and combine them with the Jewish people, even though God did not command him, and God never even reprimanded Moses for doing so. But a lot of pains came to the Jewish people on this account. And we know that if the soul is not rectified, that it will be either reincarnated but anyway, it will not be a rectified soul that will just continue to cause more trouble. And through all of Jewish history, we've had mixed multitudes. And in the end of days, the great battles that will ensue, not only between the Jewish people and the nations, but will be with our own brothers, the Erev Rav, whoever they may be. We think that they're the ones who are leading the secular anti-Torah battle. It's not a secret. We have many enlightened, they think they're enlightened, secular atheists who battle the religious, and not just in Israel, all over the world, and make it very hard for us. But in the end of days, it's going to be a great battle. We don't know how it's going to, each turn, but we know in the end it's all going to be good. So we have our Jewish names with us. We believe in the redemption. We know the end is going to be good, but we do know that it's difficult along the road. Maybe, there's even anti-Zionist, anti-Torah people out there, as you're probably well aware of. And we have a great class. Well, every Sunday from now on, we have some great classes that we will be recording. And I know and I do believe that Rabbi Chesed, when he gets on in the 14th, and Rabbi Gladstein, when he speaks on the 21st, they're probably going to speak about the Erev Rav. The mixed multitudes. So I don't know what the New Testament has to say, but when I talk about the mixed multitudes, certain Christians they get very offended when I mention that they were the bad seed. I don't know what the New Testament has to say that gets their goat, but they were a lot of them. There were a lot of them. The Torah itself, the way the Kli Yakar understands it, is that they were twice the amount. So if there were 600,000 Jewish men between the age of 20 and 60 that were counted in the census in the desert, that means there were about 3 million Jews altogether, because they had wives and they had children. So if you had, and only 1/5 of the Jews left Egypt. It says they went up armed. In Hebrew it says chamush. Right? Chamush means armed. Like Givat HaTachmoshet means ammunition hill. When you go into a mall, the guard asks you if you're chamush, if you're armed. Anyway, the word chamush is also related to the word chamesh. Chamesh means 5. Or in our case, in the context, means 1/5. 1/5 says the Jewish people went up armed. It means they went up 1/5. So 4/5 during the 9th plague, that plague of darkness, where we went around and asked for the gold, the jewelry, there were 4/5 of the Jews that died. God took them out in a plague. And why during the plague of darkness? Because it wouldn't be a Kiddush Hashem, wouldn't be sanctifying God's name by Jews being killed openly. So it was hidden even from the Egyptians. They could not see what was happening, because they would say, oh, just because it's happening to us, it's happening to you too. There's no God, right? I mean, the whole point was for God's glory. So if God killed 4/5 of his own people through this plague, the Egyptians would have been, they wouldn't have gotten the message. Now, what about the Jews? Rashi tells us why were they killed? Why? Because they didn't want to leave. They themselves didn't want to leave. Can you imagine when the time comes, Jews all over the world, they have an opportunity, last opportunity, a plane ticket to Israel, before it's too late. I'm staying. I don't believe in that stuff. They're gone. They're gone. It's a sad thing, but that's, the Jews today, and for all eternity, they always had an opportunity to assimilate, to say, I don't want a part of this. And they're out of it. They're out, It would be the wrong choice to make. But God swore, he promised that the Jewish people would be eternal, but it's a choice that each person can make. Do I want to be a part of that eternal nation or not? So even, for sure, a convert makes that choice, but even a Jew is faced with that choice.